So this little demo, I'm going to try something new. I've never done a video before. I'm going to do a pin wash on a Boxcar. So you'll end up with a nice weathered looking beat up Boxcar. I've also done some other prep work before I did the oils, and I'll go over that briefly. But yeah, if you get something like that from a starting point of that. So let's go over this little technique. So the first thing that I generally do is take a bit of do an airbrush weathering coat over the factory paint just to dull it down and give it some tooth to start working with. So this car here is straight out of the box, no mods whatsoever. This car here has had some initial prep work done. So that prep work was I've weathered the wheels and the trucks with some airbrush paints and weathering stuff. I usually use a grimy black or oily black on the wheels. These ones have got a bit more rust. Depends what you want to go with. Then on the body, I'll take a wash of, in this case it was Trueline Train CN red number 12, which I think is a kind of a general boxcar red for CN cars. I thinned it down and then gave it a airbrush to give it mute the Canadian national lettering and such that you see here. And then after that I did a bit of a grime airbrushing on the bottom of the car just to get a bit of texture to it. The other thing I did was I did a wash, or did a range of grays and blacks and wood color to get a weathered look to the roof walk. So basically took grays and dark grays and wood colors, and I believe these were Vallejo colors as well, and I just put them on individual boards just to get a bit more weathered look, because these roof walks tended to weather fairly heavily, and after about the mid 1960s, CN quit maintaining the roof walks because of the rules that they didn't want people walking on the roofs anymore. So these cars got minimal work after that. So once I've done all this, I let it dry, and then I also trimmed off the horns on these trucks. The one thing I would recommend is painting your couplers a rust color. I use this Vallejo dry oxide, or sorry, that's Spanish. The dry rust from their Game Effects line, 72-136, is really good stuff. I use it on everything. It's a great weathering color. Highly recommend it. So it does a really nice job on the couplers. So that's generally what I've done with the couplers. So once I've got the wheels and the couplers and everything done, we can move on to the main event, which is these box cars. So what I've done, just putting the other cars out of the way, is I've come in and I've dabbed on a bunch of different oil paints. And what I've done prior to that is I put the oil paints onto a piece of cardboard to wick off some of the linseed oil that carries the oils. So I use burnt umber, raw umber, burnt sienna, raw sienna. It doesn't matter where. These are basically ones I probably got in Michael's or one of the craft stores somewhere, and it works well for these effects. Those are my basic colors. They kind of cover your bases for these older box cars. I mean, you can experiment with other colors. The military guys use yellows and blues and greens and all that kind of stuff. I'm just sticking with basics. I mean, I'm still starting out with this, but I really like the effect that you get. I've got the paper towel down just to be able to dab the brush onto and clean it up, and because I don't want to leave all this paint on, the oil paint. So basically I just work it on, take it down, kind of work it into all the nooks and crannies, get your grime load on, get some good coverage, And so this car has already had the airbrush effect on it. I didn't get so much road grime on this one. Depends on the time, what I was feeling like, I think. And then I get into the ladder styles and everywhere just to get a bit of coverage. Now I do tend to leave a bit more right in this area where the door track comes in, and a little less in here behind the door, because there seems to be less. When you look at the prototype photos, there's less grime in this area underneath the rail, and more tends to come off the end here and down the side. I tend to work in verticals, and vertical straight streaks is always a good plan, just to keep things, you don't see things unless it's a door scrape or somebody's run into the car. Very little you see in this direction, except maybe associated with the door sliding. Everything else tends to be vertical streaks and the like. And with this, I just work it down. You want to have a subtle effect. I don't want to have it gaudy or too overdone, because I find that looks too cartoonish. I mean, it doesn't hurt to have the occasional car that's going to have some heavier weathering, but most of them were just, in service and tended to get a lot of grime accumulation. You want some grime accumulating anywhere there's a flat surface like this door rail on the tops here and the like. This one I'll probably leave a little more streaking right in this area, but I'll take off most of this. And kind of play it by ear. I tend to want to let the oil come off. I bring a lot of it off just because I think I like the a little more subtle effect. That's just my personal preference. If you do what you like and however you like the appearance of it. So this one I've got a bit more heavy streaking in here, a bit of streaking along there. Maybe it looks like somebody's boots have been banging against the car side. Some grime on the ends. Try and get a bit of grime here along the roof line. I'll probably get a bit more oil or a bit more odorless mineral spirits that are kind of what you want to use on these things. Maybe a bit heavier grime on the car bottom, like along the bottom of the door, along the edges. Basically anywhere where you think you have some crud accumulating is worth doing it. And these ones I just bring it down the side. Try and keep it straight, although easier said than done sometimes. And these cars seem to have quite a range of, sometimes you could barely see they were brown, they were as black as they were brown. And then other ones are almost as clean as the day they came out of the factory. So, and subtlety is kind of the key. I'm a fan of not overdoing it. Sometimes it's easier said than done. And I try and work in long strokes, because if you leave brush strokes, it's more easily seen, and I don't know, it doesn't look as good. And I don't want to have too much oil or too much of the mineral spirits on the brush, because it'll take too much off. But at the same time, you don't want to, you want to have it kind of blending, and everything should be kind of looking like it kind of all from the same vintage. So some panels will be heavier, some will be lighter, and on this one I'm going to do a bit more along the edge. I've already done the roof on this one, so I've done an oil wash over the roof. You can see a bit of and I also had done a bit of paint failure on the roof, and I did that with a mix of gray and silver paint that I mixed. Then I took a makeup sponge that I just dabbed it on. I kind of almost dry brushed it, but by using a piece of the makeup sponge, you can get this nice flaky paint appearance. So that's a bit of a pool that needs to dry yet from the oil paint I'm doing. But you get this nice grimy, cruddy looking roof that's had some paint failure, but also streaks of stuff coming off. So with this one, we'll start letting it dry, and then the thing is, if you don't like the effect, you can come back and redo it, and add layers. There's lots of ways to add layers to this stuff. In this case, I'm going to add a bit of I'm going to add a bit of raw sienna just to get a bit more of a rust, a light colored rust on some of these panel lines. Maybe there'll be a bit of a rusty patch in here. You know, you can have little dabs here and there. Might be just little bits of paint damage because these aren't young cars. These were built in 1938 and I'm modeling in the early 80s, so these would be getting towards the end of their service lives, if not into maintenance away at that point. And then for that, small dabs, I'll use a smaller brush instead of a broad tip, and then just work it in and work it down the car side, cleaning it off. And you know, maybe there's too much there, I can move it over and put dabs elsewhere, but I think that's going to be too much. So this one I'll just clean that, and maybe just have a slight hint of a later rust patch coming down here, and you can play with it, you know, and that doesn't look great at this point, but let's see what we do when we blend it all in here. Try and keep everything vertical. That's the big thing. You can get grime building up on the steps here because that's where people's boots tended to land. And this one will probably lighten off even more. You get a bit of rust on the roof edge and up here, you know, just streaky's good. So this is the other side of the car, so it's dried off pretty well, but you get the grime build up along the edge. You get a bit more heavy areas along here, some up in the corners along the roof line. So this car is well used. It's not going to be something you want to be running in your passenger service necessarily. The other thing is I like to have a bit of grime around the rollers, and that areas where you'd see stuff building up over time. This one has had the trucks have been weathered. I've got the grimy oily black on the wheels, and like I said, the roof has got the oil into the margins of the roof panels, and I've also got this paint failure that I did with a makeup sponge and some gray and silver paint to get that galvanized metal look. So this car is coming along well, and I think basically I just have to do the ends, and she should be ready to go back on the layout. Alright, so the previous washes that I put on have dried. You can kind of see the effect. It's pretty nice, and lots of dark washes on it, and streaky, just lots of grime. I'm looking for a nice patina like this, so you get the patina along the roof, and then on the margins of the roof here, and on the panels. Now, I've already done this one end. You can see the grime is kind of coming along the edges and on the panels. It kind of gives you like a road grime. I haven't done this end yet. It's pretty clean, so I'll do a quick fix on that and get it looking similar. So once again, I've got my palette of umbers and siennas. So I'm going to take some burnt umber and just dab it into nooks and crannies. Then I'll add some umber, sienna, and other stuff just to get a bit more of a look, to a weathered look on this. I try to do it on a little bit on each spot. This is a bit of the raw umber, and then I'll throw some sienna in here. And this looks crappy. It just looks terrible. There's no way around it. You know, that's kind of what you're going for, is a crappy, beat up, junky car that you're not going to be wanting to rub your pants or your shirt against. All this kind of stuff always has grime and stuff. And this car being, I mean, I'm modeling early 1980s, and this car was built in the late 30s, according to the 1938. So it's going to be well on its way to being out of service. This one is probably going to be only in grain service, or maybe I'll have it in work service at this point for my era. So, you know, just not really trying to get any rhyme or reason for it. Just get a bit on everything. We'll take that out of the way. Take my nice wide brush, kind of a medium brush. It's about a 2/3 of an inch wide. And we're just going to blend everything in. Just smoosh it all around. And we'll take some off. Clear some more off. Nice to leave it in the margins of the rivets and along the ribs and such. Get that rib right along these ribs. Highlights the edges. Gives you a bit of patina. That's the word I'm looking for. Other thing here is I've got my rusty coupler on here, so gives you an idea of what I was trying to go for there. Let's throw a bit more onto the ladder, get it grimy as well. Gives you a highlight on the rivets on the rungs. And you want some grime on the ladder. It's rung on the bottom rung here, just to show it's been sprayed and covered in dirt and mud and whatever else has come in there. Now if you wanted to, you could probably highlight some stainless, like on the rungs, show it's been covered in like somebody's been walking on it. You could have some stainless steel showing through, or you know, any number of options. Layers are always nice to try on these things. So same thing, try and stick to taking things in a vertical direction. Dab it, and I'll probably do more layers later on once this dries and see how it looks. So now we wait and see what it looks like when when it's dry. So here we are, finally have the car dry, and I can show you the final results. The interesting thing here is the top car is actually the same model as the lower car, same number, so I have to renumber this car. One thing I didn't remember about this car, that I actually added a CN maple leaf on this particular model. This one was the early phase before they introduced the monogram, or the CN maple leaf symbol. So I took this car, added the maple leaf as a decal, probably a black cat decal, and so this one I'll have to do the same and renumber it. Maybe it'll become a work service car or something. But so this is as it comes from the manufacturer. Although I've weathered the wheels, you can kind of get the idea. So you can, with the oil weathering and the pin washers, you can get it looking like a very used, beaten up piece of equipment. So just the overall view. So the roof, I've got, as I talked about, kind of the stippled with a makeup sponge and some paint to make it look like a paint failure. And then on this side, you see the general streaking coming down the side, focused in here. I also added, when I added the maple leaf, I also added a ACI label, and CN had a car classification system that they introduced with yellow dot with a letter denoting what kind of service it should be in. and then on the ends you can see the grime build up between the ribs and along the top. And then on the other end, same thing, you get the general road grime on the ends that shows a car that's been around a while. So overall, quite happy with how this turned out. So if you want to try this yourselves, I encourage it. It's actually a very interesting effect. Right, thanks.